The clock on the desk reads 2:07 in the morning. The material feels alive now, each sentence clicking into place with a satisfying sense of clarity. Tomorrow's exam suddenly seems manageable, even easy, because the notes finally make perfect sense. So why, a week from now, will most of this knowledge have vanished without a trace? The student puts the book down, confident that the late-night marathon worked. And at the moment, the confidence is real. The words on the page feel familiar, fluid, and fast. But a strange thing happens when a person tries to recall the information without the book open in front of them. The fluency of reading creates a warm, reassuring glow that can quietly mask an empty space where durable memory should be. This is the Crammer's paradox. The more the material feels like it's sinking in, the less it may actually be sticking. Psychologists call the smooth, easy feeling of recognition fluency. Fluency is the sense that something is familiar, that a person could produce it again, because it flows so naturally right now. The trap is that the brain treats fluency as a signal of learning, even when the signal is false. Think of it like hearing a song on the radio every morning. A listener can hum along perfectly, but if someone suddenly cuts the music and asks them to sing the verses alone, they freeze. The melody was familiar, but the memory was riding on the background track without ever learning the notes independently. Cramming builds that same fragile scaffolding. It teaches a learner to recognize, not to retrieve. And in the quiet of an exam room, when the book is closed and the music stops, retrieval is all that counts. The brain's shortcut makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. If something feels easy, why would anyone suspect it isn't learned? A smooth mental path felt safe, so the brain learned to trust fluency as a rough gauge of knowledge. But that gauge was built for a world without formal exams, cumulative knowledge, and delayed application. The mismatch matters because the Crammer's confidence is not a character flaw. It's a cognitive illusion. Researchers have tested this illusion in classrooms and laboratories for decades. In one common experiment, students study a list of foreign vocabulary words, either in one long session or spaced over several days. Right after studying, the Crammers often feel more confident and even predict higher test scores. And when the test comes immediately, they sometimes do perform similarly to the spaced learners. But when the test is delayed by even a few days, the Crammer's performance drops sharply, while the spaced learners retain much more. The cruel twist is that the initial success of cramming reinforces the illusion, making the student trust the method next time. Passing the short quiz makes the brain log the late-night panic as an effective strategy. The feedback loop tightens. Each minor success after cramming blinds the learner to the long-term forgetting that follows quietly later. So why does spacing study out so dramatically? The answer lies in how memories are built. Every time something is learned, the brain does not simply record it like a video camera. Instead, a fragile trace is formed, almost like a path through a forest that begins to close again almost immediately. When the material is revisited after a gap, the mind actively reconstructs the memory, and each reconstruction strengthens the path. Cramming, by contrast, is like stomping the same small circle over and over in one night, but never walking the path on one's own later. The forgetting that happens between spaced sessions is not a sign of failure. It is part of the strengthening process. Psychologists call this desirable difficulty, the idea that some struggle during learning makes the memory more durable. The effort of pulling a half-forgotten fact from the back of the mind is exactly what signals the brain to fortify that connection. Cramming avoids that struggle entirely because the answer is always right there on the page, fresh and effortless. The student at 2 a.m. feels brilliant because no gap of forgetting ever tests the real strength of the memory. Everything flows because the information never leaves immediate working memory. It cycles in a closed loop. That closed loop feels productive, but it's like swimming with floaties and believing one has mastered open water. The deeper problem is that the brain has two different strengths: storage strength and retrieval strength. Storage strength is how deeply a memory is embedded. It grows slowly and never seems to decrease once high. Retrieval strength is how easily a memory can be accessed right now. It rises fast with recent practice, but also fades fast. Cramming spikes retrieval strength for the exam, but does almost nothing for long-term storage strength. That's why a student might ace the test on Friday and draw a complete blank by the following Wednesday. The memory was not destroyed. It was never built solidly in the first place. Sleep plays a crucial role here, and the crammer usually sacrifices it. During deep sleep, the brain replays and reorganizes the day's learning, moving important information into more stable networks. By cutting sleep to cram more, the student not only weakens the initial encoding due to exhaustion, but also robs the brain of its consolidation window. So the cycle is self-defeating. Less sleep for more study yields poorer memory, which makes the student feel they need to cram even harder next time. Yet the feeling of cramming remains seductively powerful because it offers a tangible sense of control during a stressful night. Highlighting, rereading, and summarizing feel like building a fortress, even if the walls are made of tissue paper. The brain confuses the physical activity of studying, the hand moving, the eyes scanning, with cognitive progress. That is why a whole page can be highlighted and feel like an accomplishment, while the student cannot explain a single concept in their own words. The student in the lamplight is not lazy or foolish. They are experiencing one of the most reliable and misleading illusions in human learning. Now return to that 2 a.m. moment with a more precise lens. The rapid read-through of notes feels easy because the material is passively flowing past. The real measure would be to close the book and try to write down the key points from memory, but that would feel hard and uncomfortable. And discomfort, in the mind of a stressed student, feels like a warning sign, not a signal of growth. The tragedy of cramming is that it takes the most honest alarm bell, the struggle to remember, and makes us run from it. Real learning invites that struggle. It asks the learner to sit with the blank page and reconstruct the architecture of knowledge from scratch. When that happens, the next reading session becomes not a repeat, but a repair of the gaps that were discovered. Cramming never reveals the gaps because it never tests them. It papers over the holes with a smooth coat of short-term recognition. That's the central reversal. The very ease that makes cramming feel effective is the most reliable predictor that the learning will be shallow. The evidence for this spans decades. The spacing effect is one of the oldest and most replicated findings in cognitive psychology. In some studies, spaced learners remember twice as much after a delay compared to massed learners, even when total study time is equal. The effect appears in learning foreign languages, math, medical procedures, and even motor skills, like playing the piano. It's not a quirky exception. It's a fundamental property of how the human brain encodes durable memories. Yet knowing this doesn't automatically override the gut feeling that says, I need to stay up and go over this one more time. Because cramming isn't just a habit. It's an emotional bargain with anxiety. It promises that if the material is looked at one more time, the learner will be safe from the shame of a blank page. That promise is the real hook, and it momentarily quiets the fear, even if the quiet is an illusion. And here we arrive at the climax of the illusion. The comfort of fluency is not a sign of learning. It is a sign that only the surface is being scratched. The high confidence was genuine, but it was confidence in a fragile echo, not in the sturdy voice of true understanding. Recognizing this distinction changes how the very feeling of easy review is interpreted. When the page reads smoothly in the middle of the night, that smoothness is a warning, not a reassurance. The struggle to recall after a delay, That slight panic when something can't quite be remembered is the sound of a memory being built to last. Learners have to learn to trust the discomfort, to see it as the brain's way of upgrading the weak trace into a durable structure. The Crammer's paradox is solved not by willpower, but by changing what is considered a productive study session. A session that feels harder and leaves fewer certainties may actually be the one that best protects against future forgetting. In the days after the exam, the student who crammed will look back with relief, but the knowledge will drain away quietly. The student who spaced their practice and tested themselves before feeling ready will carry the material into the next course, the next year, and beyond. The difference between the two outcomes was already visible in that single late-night moment under the lamp. One student was measuring the temperature of the water. The other was learning to swim. So the next time someone finds themselves drawn to an all-night review session, notice the feeling of fluency for what it is, a mirage. The warmth of recognition is not a friend. It's a decoy that keeps the real work from being done. Instead, close the book sooner, get a full night's sleep, and test yourself the next morning on what you remember. The results will feel less satisfying at first because the gaps will be obvious and uncomfortable. But those gaps are precisely the roadmap for making the memory solid, and each retrieval attempt fills them in a little more. One doesn't have to abandon the urgency that makes learning feel possible. It just needs to be channeled into smarter timing. Even a small spacing, studying an hour tonight, then again tomorrow, then again in 3 days, can produce dramatic improvements. The science is not asking for blind trust. It's inviting everyone to test it against their own experience. When studying for something that matters, pay attention to the difference between the feeling of ease and the evidence of recall. The clock still ticks toward 2 a.m., but now the smooth pages are whispering a different message. They are not saying you know this. They are saying you recognize this, and that is a much smaller gift.